still have to eat. They have to have housing. Who was buying the machine guns, the walkie-talkies, the dune buggies? He was on the edge of the Mojave Desert. They didn't steal all of it. None of them were hardly ever arrested for anything. They had parts of expensive cars. They had material things that are warfare things, and they didn't ever get arrested. And the gasoline, once in a while, as punishment, the girls would have to go out and take food out of garbage cans. That was their punishment, maybe for not sleeping with Charlie or a guest or something like that. But for the most part, none of them suffered malnutrition. They had healthy babies. They seemed to be doing very well. They had guests at the ranch. Where was this money coming from the day he left that jail until the Sharon Tate murders? Just like I followed the money of the James Ray case from the day he left the Missouri jail. He went right to a trailer the first night that was open. There was wine there. There was everything but the welcome sign, and maybe that was there. And within a day, he had a car. Pretty soon, he was on his way up to Canada, a resort, motel, and a fancy place. Where did the money come from the time Charlie Manson was in jail until the Sharon Tate murder? Now, we go to Charles Watson. This was a clean-cut boy who did these murders. He came from Texas. And the question was, where was he approached? How did he get into this case? Was it of his own volition? Last week, on the Monterey Peninsula, there was an article in the paper that a boy was picked up as a hitchhiker in Santa Cruz, and he was thrown out of the car near the Highlands Inn, and he was almost killed. And the subject of the conversation was that one of the four men who just about killed him, he said, I'm from the Manson family in Texas. And that caught my interest because I know that something very big in the planning stage of this particular massacre took place in the state of Texas. So I went to community hospital to discuss with this boy. This boy attended 5 years of college in the American system of education. He was about to go to the Peace Corps and go to the Philippines the next week, was almost dead out at community hospital after just going down our beautiful coast and being picked up and roughed up by somebody who claimed to be from the Manson family in Texas. Now, we don't know much, because it's never brought out at these trials, about the background of Charles Watson, except that he did appear with a beard and became part of the Manson family. But when Charles Manson was arrested, a law firm sent 2 lawyers, went to Texas to see this particular boy, Charles Watson. And Judge David Brown, said to the lawyers from Beverly Hills, California, you take the next plane back to California, that I will put you in jail for 72 hours or fine you if you don't get back to California. And the lawyers said, well, wait a minute, that's our client. We want to see him. The lawyer that wanted to see Charles Watson was named Mr. DeLoach. And he called a press conference at a Dallas hotel. And DeLoach said this at the press conference. He said, I came to see my client, that Charles Watson had been in his office in Los Angeles, California, 30 or 40 times prior to the killing of Sharon Tate and the other 6 people in Los Angeles. DeLoach said his own background was that he was a Republican candidate for the state assembly in 1964, and he was chairman of the Young Republicans. And he belonged to a law firm on Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles. At the jail, to keep Mr. DeLoach from seeing Charles Watson, were 20 Texas highway patrolmen, sheriff's deputies, guarding him, and they fought the extradition for 8 months. Now, when you're talking about conspiracies or going into every avenue that has to be developed, in the course of the trial, Mr. Watson claims for his defense that Charlie Manson masterminded him, programmed him, that the hippie used magic, a Satan kind of thing, to control him, to use his knife to kill these people. That prior to that time, prior to meeting Manson, he was not involved in any kind of violence or altercation. Now, I've seen no record publicly that Mr. Watson had a traffic violation or any kind of problem, that this 20-year-old boy needed an attorney from the Republican National Committee, Young Republican Committee, 40 times. I know what the expenses are to meet with any attorney, even for 1 hour. and people use attorneys or public defenders if they have small altercations. But to go to a prominent law office of a man named Mr. LaLoach 30 to 40 times prior to the time that you're going to kill 7 people is worth investigating. And it's particularly worth investigating because the boy isn't even really considered a criminal or a murderer. When the trial for Charlie Manson took place, this boy was in Texas. And they fought the extradition, so he later wouldn't be associated as part of that clan, but as the robot or the project of that society. Now, the psychiatrists claim that when the decision was made to remove Charles Watson to California, that he became a catatonic, schizophrenic vegetable in a fetal position. 8 months in Texas, he was doing just fine. He didn't lose a pound. He didn't lose a night's sleep. He was just having a good time. And when the decision came to bring him to California, he became very sick. And now they have said, the prosecution claims that he was faking this, that when the psychiatrists look at the other way, he would take a different posture and he would talk to people. And the jury has been out for 2 days trying to decide if Charles Watson was guilty of those murders. They have to deliberate 2 days when it is common knowledge that he was in the home, he did the murders, and Manson was never in the home where 7 people were killed. Now, if that isn't a topsy-turvy, crazy world, I don't know what it is. Now, how does your mind get affected to only associate the murder with one man and let the other man off the hook like this? I'm going to read headlines from this particular case just for a few days in December, the way they were reading coming off the press. The first article I told you was in October 1969, Did Hate Kill Tate? That was the first opinion about who did it by Ed Butler. In November, there was a very objective article saying the grand jury is to end the probe of these 7 deaths. They don't know what to do. Now, in December, they began to describe Watson as a, in quotes, man. They called him a man. And that Manson was the hippie, the guru Satan that influenced the man. The man did the killings, and the hippie guru Satan influenced him. The headline of December 2nd said, Nomadic Hippies in the Tate murder. December the 3rd, 3 suspects in Tate case tied to guru. December the 4th, accused killers lived nomad life with magnetic guru. December the 4th, another paper said, hypnotic killers, hippie bands, that controlled by an evil genius. Another headline, father became a hippie, looking for Sharon Tate clues. Sharon Tate's father, dressed as a hippie, looked around with drug addicts and vagabonds for 4 months. He was in Army intelligence, and he was looking for hippies who killed his daughter. Another headline. These are the headlines, not sentences from article. A move to indict God. Another headline. The DA asked hippie cult indictment. Another one. Inside the cult's desert hideout. Family members talk of black magic, sex, murder. You see, the headline is putting all of these things in your heads, but it's not telling you, like the early articles, about the military type of killing that it was. Another headline, Charlie Manson, nomadic guru, flirted with crime. Another one, hippie family member describes the murder. Another one describes the murders as bizarre, twisted. Cult leader, plotted the war between the races, the cult leader. Mystic hippie, in quotes, used dune buggies mounted with machine guns to trigger a Negro versus white war. Another headline, hippie Satan clan is indicted. Talkative cult leader arraigned in slayings. Another headline, leader of the hippie cult held in isolated cell. Hippie leader in Tate case in maximum security. If they want to say the alleged murderer is in maximum security, he's the hippie leader in security. He's a hippie leader in isolated cell. Another article, the hippie mystique. Another one, the love and terror cult, the dark edge of hippie life. Life magazine published a cover of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a gun. The shadows, the discrepancies in the murder are horrendous. They implant in your mind, this is the boy, this is the gun. None of it was true. Life magazine had a cover of James Earl Ray this poverty-ridden, depressed prisoner who killed Martin Luther King. They said he was an orphan. None of that was true. Member of his family, with his father's living. I mean, all of that was untrue. Member of Life magazine, December the 19th, large cover of Charlie Manson's eyes, all blown up. Not in Texas, not wanting to understand the American phenomena of hostility behind a blue suit and a white shirt and a necktie and short hair, the killer, not wanting to know how the Whitman boys kill, how the college people killed, the brain children, one of the brightest children in this town, Charlie Watson. Nobody doing psychological, sociological studies on the actual killers. No, Life magazine has a cover of Manson. Nobody would sleep at night or give a kid on the road a ride when you saw Manson's eyes. Not a chance. They call it the love and terror cult. Then Richard Nixon comes into the act. Headlines. Here is a man who was guilty directly or indirectly of 8 murders without reason. They hadn't even come to a verdict in the trial. Richard Nixon was in on the act. John Mitchell got into the act. Then they got headlines. Manson race theory. Rested on the Beatles. Then began a long attack on the Beatles. Now, those are the headlines of 1 month in December. That went on for 1 year. And the consequence is that in Carmel Valley or down to Big Sur, how many people would you pick up today? How many people do you put in your car or give a lift to or take into your home? Who would you trust? Who is disguised as a hippie with a knife that is going to come down on you? I was in my neighbor's home across the street from me one day, and we were talking about something, and a man from the police force in Seaside, a black man, had come there, and he didn't know who I was, and we were rapping. And he'd been down at Limekiln Creek, and he had lived with hippies for 2 weeks and smoked their grass and probably enjoyed the sex and the relationships and the vibes. And he was going home. He was on his way home to Seaside to clean and shave and go down and make a bust on those people. Dressed as a hippie, beard. He was going to take his beard off. I have seen it. I've lived with it. You can't give a lift because the agent provocateurs, the covert government is working. It's working in our city, and I can say it works on a national scale. You read in the paper yesterday, maybe, how much of the Pentagon Papers is not being published and why it's being withheld. And a large part of it is the covert relationship to Vietnam. The agents in disguise in Laos or in Vietnam are hidden war. The Manson thing is a hidden war. It's a hidden war against the youth, and it worked. If you take enough agents and give them blades or give them money or give them the assurance that if they're arrested, they'll get off, they will mess up these kids. So I'm just showing you, if you multiply 1 month of headlines and you sat with my collection or somebody just published, how the news media comes down on you.
You're listening to researcher and broadcaster Mae Brussell. Today's show from 1971, Charles Manson and the Crushing of the Counterculture. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter.
Now, who were the lawyers involved in these cases? How do they overlap? Joseph Ball from the Warren Commission was in with Sue Atkins, the girl who's to turn the state's evidence. A man named Lawrence Schiller made a record with Jack Ruby on January the 2nd, 1967, in which Ruby said there was no conspiracy to kill Oswald, that he was not part of a conspiracy. And it was made for Capitol Records. Capitol Records. And this man, I knew on January the 2nd, when I read that in the paper, I knew that Ruby then would be dead within days because it was now recorded for history. There was no conspiracy. No one could see Jack Ruby except Capitol Records. The only person that could see Jack Schiller, Lawrence Schiller, was with him. January the 4th, 2 days later, Ruby was dead. The morning I read that in my paper, that Capitol Records got into that hospital room and got this recording of Ruby's voice, I knew then that now Ruby could leave this earth. You see, it's all down for posterity. Now, this same Lawrence Schiller is the man who gave Sue Atkins $150,000 to turn the state's evidence to say that Manson masterminded the murders. She made $150,000. It was described as an unusual legal trade. Joseph Ball, who worked with the Warren Commission, was with parties involved in the Sharon Tate massacre. George Shibley, who worked with Sirhan and Luke McKissick is in his office, they worked with the Sirhan case. They were in on the Sharon Tate case. The lawyers overlap. Now, Lawrence Schiller wrote a book about the Sharon Tate massacre.